right, moving on very quickly now away from FSAS issues. The Nigerian Labour Congress has rejected in its entirety the 27,000 naira minimum wage being recommended by the National Council of State. NLC General Secretary Peter Ozoeson says the National Council of State has no jurisdiction to determine any amount different from that agreed by a tripartite committee. Now, that committee approved 30,000 naira as the national minimum wage. The NLC is now threatening fire and brimstone if a wage bill of 30,000 naira is not translated to the National Assembly. Let's see the report.
The Council of State version is just a choice of the government of Nigeria executive as administrative framework through passage. They don't have the right to change what has been negotiated, or else there will be no need for the negotiation in the first place. We are not negotiating. The negotiation have ended. We are aware that after the 30,000 baseline, which is the minimum, that the federal government can as well would have said they will pay federal workers 35,000. This is not alien to us. The minimum wage as at 18,000, as at the time, even when Adams Oshomole was the governor of Edo State, he made that of Edo 25,000, and Edo have continued to pay 25,000, while the national minimum is 18,000. So the minimum wage as agreed by the tripartite body, which the law recognizes, agreed 30,000. Any other thing outside this is reneging in that process and throwing away the negotiation mechanism.
All right, let's begin right away. We have in the studio Dr. Dokun Adedeji. He has been following this development as well. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you.
And we also have on phone the National President of the United Labour Congress, Comrade Joe Ajero. Comrade, it's good to have you join us right now.
Thank you very much.
Let's begin with you, Comrade. We have been hearing vibes from the organized labor already following the outcome of the State Council recommendation or the adoption of 27,000 naira minimum wage. Talk to us right now. What are the undercurrents?
Well, the comment by the coming out yesterday that the Council of States has approved or has agreed or has recommended 27,000 and 30,000 naira minimum wage was a huge shock to the labor movement, because in the history of labor relations in the country or anywhere in the world, it has never been the duty, not even a constitutional duty of the National Council of State to interfere or to meddle into the issue of salary fixing. The only organ acceptable by ILO all over the world is a tripartite committee where the employers and government and labor cease to agree on what should be the minimum wage. That concluded, any other attempt to just railroad any amount, will not be acceptable to the labor movement. That is the vibe you are getting. And we have reached to that level of 30,000. And we are expecting, Mr. President, before the end of today, to transmit same to National Assembly. And National Assembly does not equally have the powers or right to add or minus on what the parties have agreed on.
Well, Joe, Comrade Joe, let me stay with you. Is this really not a case of much ado about nothing? Because the federal government has said we will pay 30,000 naira minimum wage in spite of, bringing it before the National Council of State to come up, who have come up with the 27,000 naira. Now, you're going to have an emergency meeting come Friday. Talk to us about what we should be expecting from that meeting. And,
well, the NLC will be having an emergency meeting. We quickly met yesterday, the ULC, and I know that TVC will meet. Thereafter, the three bodies will meet. Now, the issue of it is the duty of the federal government to transmit the national minimum wage bill to the National Assembly. You can't say 27 to states and 30. There should always be one national minimum wage in the country. So for you now, are we taking the 27 to state assembly or where? This is the first time one is telling you that there will be two national minimum wages. Or are we having state and national minimum wage? It's good we clarify this point. You know, and I don't think that there's any ambiguity in the issue of national minimum wage law that is in existence in the National Assembly. Theirs is to amend it, remove 18,000 and put 30,000 and indicate when it will expire. That's all.
Okay. Dr. Adedeji, let me come to you now on this. The Council of State, made up of former heads of state and chief justices of the Federation, the National Assembly leadership, state governors, and all of that, when it comes to the wealth of intellectuals, experience, and all of that that goes into what makes the Council of State, one would say that they would have considered everything. But looking at it from the perspective of the worker and what the law says and all of that, what is your reaction? What is your assessment of this?
You see, my attitude to this has always been, yes, there could be a national minimum wage, that is, nobody can go lower than it, but people should have the prerogative of either of definitely going above it or staying at that minimum wage, which I think is what we should be looking at. I agree with them that you can't have two minimum wages
in the country.
So you better agree, and then you see, because I've always said, not every state can pay the same strength, and it is not so desirable. If you live in Lagos, your means of livelihood is higher than someone who lives in Ado-Ekiti. So we must have the flexibility in which state can say, we can't go below that minimum, but this is what we pay. And then a state like Rivers, Lagos, Jos, Plateau or something can say, we will pay 32, as federal government has said. But we should not have to. Truly, which one are you going to give to the National Assembly to ratify? So for me, although I have a different view about minimum wage, about salary increase and all the rest, in line on what we've asked, I think there should be one, and then we should agree on that. And then if you have agreed on tripartite committee to pay 30, why are you going lower? I don't know what that discussions have been. They probably have a better view on what the situation is. But even in view of that, I don't think you can go beyond what has been generally agreed.
And one wonders exactly what difference removing 3,000 naira would make.
You see, I think the government is just allowing a bit of federal play, allowing states to say this is what we. But I don't think it's fair. This, there's something in this country that beats me. Which state can say categorically that it can't pay 30 if so many things are considered? What is the security vote for? The many money. Look, I think it was over the weekend that they had Man of the Year, something in Lagos, maybe Civil Bird or something. Some governors came with like as many as 30, 40 people to receive an award. That's a lot of money. A governor is going out, he goes in a retinue of about 20 cars. Those are wastage that can be plugged to pay these workers. But again, as I said to you, I think we're missing something in this country, particularly the labor union. I've said it to many of them when I was in human resources. The labor union uses salary increase to play to the gallery, to say this is what we fought for. I don't think it makes sense to me. Salary increase does not. I think what unions should sit down to say, what are the benefits that accrue to our people whilst they work and when they retire? And then if in this country we have good education, health services, and then the roads are good, utilities are good, I don't think people will be clamoring for so much salary increase. Because if you increase it, in 3 months, you will come back to the same level. Okay. The woman in the market, the road transport, I mean.
All right, Joe Ajero is definitely still there on the phone. Comrade Joe Ajero, you just heard what our guest said, that labor, organized labor, of course, including the ULC, doesn't seem to be looking at, the bigger picture, the fundamentals, that this issue of minimum wage every now and again really would not solve the problem. Are you looking at really tackling the problem where it is?
Well, that is an issue which I will say for another day, because we are talking of minimum wage right now. Now, why do I say so? I don't want to bring in any distraction. The issue of maybe transportation, education, and all that, are real welfare issues that the state must, as a matter of necessity, provide. Now, they are not there. And then if they are not there, and I have to pay my children's school fees, I have to pay my transportation, it will not be charitable for anybody to ask me not to ask for a salary increase that will take care of all this. So it can be either this or that. Even if the issue of a living wage has nothing to do with whether the state is providing free education or not. The issue of a living wage for a family of maybe 6 people on what they will eat in a country where the government is not providing accommodation, they are not providing health care, med care, they are not providing no free transportation. It's something you have to factor based on cost of living index, other things put together. So I will not be talking of now transportation when my salary is not enough for me even to go to work. So these issues must be taken in perspective. If we have fixed all these ones in order, by now you can be thinking of a lower minimum wage since other issues have been taken care of. Now, if they are not taken care of, you have to bring all these things to the table. I think we should look at it from that angle.
All right,
it
Joe.
doesn't mean that the labor unions, are not taking care of their members and other issues. I think what is happening is that this one is national. If you check in other areas like in private sector where some of us operate, our conditions of services are not brought to the national level to be negotiated. We negotiate it. Retirement benefits, gratuity, all those things are negotiated. So on a daily basis, we are busy doing those works, taking care of our members, health and safety issues till this moment. So I don't think we have abdicated in our responsibilities.
All right, Joe, Comrade Ajiro, let me stay with you on this. You mentioned earlier that the National Assembly does not even have the right to add or to reduce the amount that has been passed on to it. Now, if this is passed to the National Assembly is the representative of all the people in the country, one way or the other. If they listen to your pleas and cries, doesn't the National Assembly even have the right to say, okay, even 30,000 naira may not be enough from what I've heard from people in my constituency, let's make it 32,000 or 35,000. Don't they have the right to do that?
I don't think they have such rights. We are not talking of any wage award. The federal government can on its own tomorrow give an award and say every worker should be paid this amount. They can even do what Udoji did. That one is a bonus, kind of. But when you talk of a product of tripartism, and they have agreed on this, immediately you approve that 30,000. Any state can pay 40,000, 50,000. That one is acceptable. But the national minimum wage, which is the benchmark, must be set. And that one is not the National Assembly duty to set it, whether they are being generous or otherwise. Because the parties, those concerned, representatives of labor, government, and employers have agreed that this is what we want. And you give it to them. But when you want to do a wage award to the workers, you can do that.
Will you reject it if the National Assembly decides to add up to it?
No, well, the National Assembly will only say 30,000 and maybe 12, probably with a proviso that states can pay more or federal can pay more.
Well, they would
That's what I know. If they make it 32, it's no longer the product of tripartism.
Okay. Well, the Udoji Award that you talk about, a lot of people would link the challenges in the civil service to that same Udoji Award. But let me talk about the NGF, the Governors Forum, that have said that there will be a need to review the revenue sharing formula if they will pay 30,000 naira. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think that one is a part of their politics, because even part of the issue of mentioning 27,000 naira was a way of abdicating responsibilities to the states, because there was pressure from the states. And I don't think that the states should intimidate or stampede the federal government or the presidency to such issues. If they know that the issue of revenue sharing formula has been in order, and if it is necessary, that states cannot pay and states cannot even generate the revenue, because I don't think that states should exist depending on rent from the federal government. Such states, if they are not viable, I think we can think of even states margin, or such states not existing. But if it is necessary to review the revenue sharing formula, not basically because of salary, I think we can look at that.
Okay. Comrade Joe Ajaero, President of the United Labour Congress, thank you very much for talking to us on TVC Breakfast this morning.
Thank you.
All right. Dr. Adedeji, let me come to you on this. The point there is, when, like you and Comrade Ajaero have just said, the concept of having 2 minimum wages in the country certainly is not what we've ever had in this country. But if this scales through, what kind of precedence is it going to be? What do you think are the implications or likely implications of this?
You see, one thing that bothers me about this country is lack of sticking to principles. The thing that you're doing, we never tackle things. There's no sense of rigor in when we take decisions, and we don't look also at fundamentals. If you do this, what happens next? Is it possible that maybe in 5 years' time, Labour says we want to go to 100, and then state will say I can only pay 42, and then government say I can pay 90? And what does that do? I think, in my own opinion, that we should have a uniform minimum wage, but give people opportunity to pay definitely beyond that and not below it. It's a bad precedent. Then you apply it to every other thing. Then you then go into state. Some states will say they can't pay. Some say they can pay. And then what do you set up? It will just create labor crisis that we should not be having at this time. And as I said, I do not agree with the comrade. The way union looks at things sometimes is too pedestrian, with due respect. He said, look, what can 30,000 do? Let's assume that everybody decides to pay that. Can he pay school fees? Can he take you on transport? He can't do anything. So the thing is, look, in other countries, basic things are available. I think there should be a direction of facing on the national level. These are the limits. These are the basic minimum of our expectation.
Well, the comrade seems to believe that, talking about all of these other things, it would amount to a distraction. No. Now, the real issue right now, this is a clear and present issue that needs to be tackled, and it is about the minimum wage.
I agree with that.
Yes.
You see, you know why I'm raising this for their contemplation is this. Minimum wage is nothing. You can get it. I'm not against minimum wage, but it gives a parameter that you can't go below. But look, the normal thing to think about when they're a pressure group who sits down to consider things is to look at the bigger picture. Yeah. Because if you don't look at it, you're just going to be running around this. And it said in private sector, some private sector can't pay this.
Is that an attempt to buy time on the part of the federal government and even states? Because the states are now talking about revenue sharing formula to be reviewed if 30,000 naira will not continue to be a mirage.
For me, our governance system is a rent system, rent-seeking system. What has that got to do with paying minimum wage, about revenue allocation? It's also what Ajaero said about distraction. If people manage their resources very well and follow priorities of what their people want, we should not be struggling about, yes, I do know that we should have a revenue, but what it means is rent-seeking. They're just sitting down there, there's no thinking. Lagos State would not sit to wait for revenue allocation because somebody sat down to say, hey, if you want to provide this for our people, we need to do this. I'm not saying you should make life difficult, but do things that bring you. IGR in Lagos State is like accumulation of like 10. What are the other states doing? Ogun State is beginning to do something different. Other states that are thinking are beginning to do something different. You can't depend on federal government. Yeah.
Well, it's okay. We have to leave you here now. Dr. Adedeji, thank you very much for talking to us.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Right.